In this Ignite the Truth video, I want to talk to you about hope. Hope is the second word in 1 Corinthians 13:13 when Paul says, "Now these three abide, faith, hope, and love." We're looking at what Paul might have thought about hope. But first, I want to talk to you about the modern day meaning of hope. In Israel, the word hope is always associated with a song. And that song is called Hatikva, the hope. And it talks about the Jewish yearning, the Jewish hope for a national homeland in Israel. Of course, it wasn't called Israel when this poem was first written. This song, which was originally a poem, was written by a Jewish man named Naphtali Imber. He was living in Poland and he wrote it in 1877. A poem about the yearning for the state of Israel. You know, for centuries, Jewish people at every Passover meal would say, "Next year in Jerusalem." The idea of Jerusalem, their home, was kept alive for centuries as they were in their dispersion, as they were suffering from persecution in many places. Each year they continued in their hearts to cry out, "Next year in Jerusalem." And Naphtali wrote those words down in a song that became Israel's national anthem. In the next year after the poem was written, in 1878, a town was established. That town's name is Petah Tikva. Petah Tikva means the doorway of hope. And the original settlers there, the original inhabitants, had this idea that it was the beginning of the hope leading to their state. 70 years later, on May 14th, 1948, that hope was realized and the state of Israel became a reality. When I was in Australia and New Zealand a few years ago, I met with elderly men who had been serving in the military here in Israel at that time. And they told me about the absolute jubilation in the streets of Israel. People dancing, everybody pouring out of their apartments and out of their homes and just laughing and hugging and dancing and singing because the hope of the centuries had been realized. Today, Israel is still the hope of the Jewish people, for Jewish people around the world who look at this place as the place of God's promise, as the place of hope. In our English Bibles, the first reference to hope or tikva is found in the book of Ruth. And it's when Naomi is talking to her daughters-in-law and trying to convince them to go back to their families, saying, "I have no hope of bringing more sons into this world that you can marry." But you know what? In the Hebrew, this is not the first reference to tikva. The first reference is in Joshua 2, the story of Rahab, the woman that saved the two Israeli spies and asked for her life and the life of her family in return. Now, what did they tell her to do? Put a rope outside your window, and when we come and when we overthrow the city, we will save you and your family alive. Now, in this passage, you won't find the word hope in English because the word that is tikva in this passage is the word for the rope. Imagine, how could that be? How could that be the same word as hope? Well, it seems like in biblical Hebrew, the literal meaning of tikva was a rope or a line or a cord. And even today in modern Hebrew, the word kav is the lane of traffic that you go in. It's a direction. So how did that become to be tikva? Well, figuratively, tikva means an expectation or a hope. So here is Rahab. She knows that Jericho is going to be totally destroyed. They've heard the stories of the God of Israel. They know that there is no hope for them. But she has hope. She has tikva because she has the promise of these Jewish spies that if she puts out the rope, if she puts out the tikva, if she puts that out, that her life and the life of her family will be saved. So there's something concrete in this idea of hope. It's not just a wish. It is something that we can put our trust in. Just like we talked in the last video about faith and the absolute trustworthiness of God. So hope also is a trust, a kind of trust in God. It's a trust in His steadfastness. Now, sometimes hope is deferred and our hearts get sick. And that was said in the book of Proverbs, that hope deferred makes the heart sick. But don't ever give up hope. If God has given you a promise, if you're believing Him for something, if you're trusting Him with your life, hold on to that rope of hope, because God is trustworthy and you can put that in the bank.